Sports 90, the year in review, with your host, Michael Landsberg.
If you're like us, you're wondering, how can anyone review an entire year in sport in just over 30 minutes? And the answer, of course, is it can't be done. What we propose to do over the next half hour is to look at a handful of the biggest events. And big in sport can take on a number of different faces. Big can be great. Big can be terrible. Big can be tragic. And big can be all of the above at the same time, sometimes. And our first big event had many sides to it, because our first big event rose up and slapped us in the face. It caught us off guard, because when Mike Tyson and James Buster Douglas slipped into a boxing ring in Tokyo, few had any inkling at all of what was about to unfold.
Heavyweight champion Mike Tyson came to Tokyo with an aura of invincibility. He had never lost a professional fight, demolishing his opposition to the tune of 37-0 with 33 knockouts. Tyson was favored by an unprecedented 45-1 against Buster Douglas, and most figured he could put Douglas away in his sleep. But this bout would not go according to plan. Douglas dominated and was clearly in command when in the 8th round, Tyson caught him with a stinging uppercut, sending the challenger to the mat. And that's where the controversy began. It appeared that Douglas got an extra long count from the referee, and a closer look clearly shows that referee Octavio Moran Sanchez was behind the official timekeeper in the count, and Douglas was on the canvas for a total of at least 12 seconds. But Douglas followed the referee's call, as he's supposed to, getting up at the count of 8. The bell sounded to end the round, and in the 9th and 10th, Douglas picked up right where he left off, swarming all over Tyson until the moment that many thought they would never see.
Douglas, down goes Tyson.
It's over. It's over.
Mike Tyson has been knocked out.
And in what's been called by some the greatest upset in the history of boxing, Buster Douglas was the new heavyweight champion of the world. But not immediately. Don King registered a protest over the long count, and the WBC and WBA refused to declare Douglas the champion pending an investigation. 3 days later, though, Douglas's title was confirmed, capping off the 1990 upset of the year.
Harold Ballard was like an open book. He never hid his feelings, never hesitated to speak his mind. And when you are that way, your life tends to be like an open book as well. Harold Ballard passed away this past year. But in death, just as in life, Harold Ballard was front page, lead story news. Harold Ballard did not slip quietly away.
For years, the Harold Ballard saga surrounded Maple Leaf Gardens and its hockey tenants, and created a circus-like atmosphere. The final act began around the new year in the Cayman Islands. The vacationing Ballard fell ill with heart and liver problems and was rushed to a Miami hospital. For the next month and a half, a battle raged between Ballard's female companion, Yolanda, and his 3 children over control of his affairs. On February the 14th, Ballard was declared mentally incompetent. 2 days later, former Supreme Court Justice William Estee was appointed as personal guardian. Ballard's children had, in effect, won the battle, shutting out Yolanda from access to Harold.
I feel that I look forward to working with Mr. Justice Estee, that he's an honorable and decent human being, that he understands and will understand that Harold needs me, desperately needs me as I need Harold.
Ballard was flown back to Toronto on March the 15th for heart and kidney treatments. But after only a few short weeks back home, his health took a turn for the worse.
Edwin Harold Ballard died peacefully at the Wellesley Hospital's intensive care unit at 2:50 p.m. on April 11, 1990. As his attending physicians, Dr. Janet Roscoe and I attribute his death to a combination of factors, including his overall medical condition, complicated by his diabetes, his age, his heart, kidney, and respiratory failure.
And for Canada's most storied sports arena, the passing of Harold Ballard marked not only the end of the circus, but also the end of an era.
We'll miss Harold Ballard's yearly predictions of a Stanley Cup win for his Toronto Maple Leafs. Ballard was often accused of living in a dream world, the kind of dream that is reality in Edmonton. The Oilers had amazing success in the 1980s, But their greatest achievement came in the spring of 1990, when they won without many of the players we all said they couldn't win without.
The Edmonton Oilers team that entered the 1990 playoffs was not the same club that had won 4 Stanley Cups in the previous 6 years. And the major changes were at the top. Former coach Glenn Sather was up in the private box. Goaltender Grant Fuhr was on the shelf with a shoulder injury. And the captain of those 4 Cup winners was in L.A. The replacements? John Muckler behind the bench, Bill Ranford in net, and Mark Messier as the team leader. But as with any good script, the story of the 1990 Stanley Cup playoffs actually begins in Hollywood. Despite a bad back bothering Wayne Gretzky, the Kings accomplished the big upset of the postseason, burning the Flames to a crisp, knocking off the defending Stanley Cup champs in 6 games. In the meantime, the Oilers were on the verge of extinction themselves in the first round, down 3-1 to the Jets. But Edmonton came back, taking the series in 7 and setting up a meeting with Gretzky. But the great one would not be a factor against his old mates. When his back wasn't bothering him, Esa Tikkanen was, making Gretzky a non-factor. On to the conference finals, where the Oilers benched the Blackhawks, taking them out in 6 games. In the finals, the Boston Bruins would be greeted with a goaltending performance nothing short of spectacular. Bill Ranford was nearly unbeatable, stopping just about anything Boston could throw at him. The Bruins were left in the dark, and after another Boston Garden electrical problem was cleared up, the Oilers won Game 1 in triple overtime, a defeat from which not many teams could recover. The Oilers won 2 of the next 3 and took it back to Boston for Game 5, up 3-1. There was simply no strategy to stop the Oilers' drive to the Cup. Edmonton gets more fancy play and more tremendous goaltending for a 4-1 win. The Stanley Cup was once again returning to Edmonton, with Mark Messier replacing Gretzky as the league MVP, with Bill Ranford replacing Fuhr as the last line of defense, and with John Muckler behind the bench. Who'd have thunk it? The Oilers were indeed back on top.
Who'd have thunk it? There's no hockey equivalent to baseball's no-hitter. In fact, there's nothing like it in any other sport. The no-hitter has a mystique, a life to it all its own. In 1989, in Major League Baseball, there were no no-hitters. In 1990, they seemed to come weekly.
There are certainly some tall tales to tell when looking back at 1990's flood of no-hitters. So take a deep breath and try to stay with us. Just 3 days into the season, Mark Langston and Mike Witt teamed up for only the 4th combined no-hitter in Major League history. Randy Johnson became the tallest man to toss a no-hitter. In fact, he's the tallest man ever to throw a pitch in the big leagues. No-hit mania might have hit its peak on June the 29th. For the first time in 73 years, 2 no-hitters were tossed on the same day. Fernando Valenzuela in L.A. and the A's' Dave Stewart in Toronto. The Blue Jays would get their revenge, though, a couple of months later in Cleveland. It was only fitting that Dave Steve joined the parade. He's been the only man in history to lose no-hitters with 2 out in the 9th inning on 3 different occasions. The strangest one of the year undoubtedly belonged to Andy Hawkins. Thanks to 2 outfield errors, the White Sox scored 4 unearned runs for a 4-0 win. It was only the 3rd ever no-hit defeat. Also joining the no-hit jamboree, Terry Mulholland and Mileto Perez and a rain-shortened job. But the most memorable no-hitter of all came June the 11th. Nolan Ryan had already tossed 5 of them, a Major League record. And now at the age of 43, Ryan was looking to become the oldest man ever to do it.
Fly ball, right field. Rubenchier in foul territory. Number 6 for Nolan Ryan. The Express has done it once again.
So in a year when no-hitters were coming fast and furious, one would rise above the rest. And with his 300th win coming a few weeks later, the legend of Nolan Ryan would continue to grow.
9 no-hitters in one season was the most pitched in this century. None were thrown by a pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds, but I don't think Red fans will feel at all cheated by what they saw, by what they experienced in 1990. That story and more when we return.
So what's a little dandruff?
Okay, imagine you're at the social event of the year, and your dream girl says hello, just as you do this. Her first impression? What a hunk. Only a few flakes.
Give me a break.
The breaks are you never get a second chance to make a first impression.
So?
Try this.
Head and Shoulders? But you don't have dandruff. Your hair looks great.
Bingo.
Head and Shoulders, because you never get a second chance to make a first impression.
You know, I have to confess, I find you irresistible. Sometimes you're delicate and tantalizing. Other times, you're warm and passionate. And anywhere, anytime, you're a terrific charmer. And so...
Al dente. It's made in Italy, and that's what I love about it.
Pasta made in Italy, true love.
Welcome back to Sports 90, the year in review. I'm Michael Landsberg. If we were broadcasting in Germany, we might have devoted this entire half hour to just one story. 1990 was a World Cup year in soccer.
About 2 billion people around the globe watched the opening ceremonies as 24 nations geared up for what's often called the only true World Championship. First-round action provided plenty of excitement, sometimes as much for the announcers as for the fans and players.
Atención a esta llegada de Colombia. Llega Colombia, Rincón. ¡Gol! ¡Gol! ¡Gol de Colombia!
And if Colombia was excited over their first-round showing, fans of Cameroon were ecstatic. The tiny nation was a huge underdog entering the tournament, a 500-to-1 shot. But in the opening game, they stunned the soccer world, downing defending champion Argentina. Cameroon became the darlings of the competition with a run that didn't end until overtime of the quarterfinals. But Diego Maradona would lead the Argentinians back into contention, despite taking a constant beating by the opposition. He was fouled 6 times in one game alone, but still helped set up Argentina's second consecutive run to the World Cup final. But Maradona wasn't the only one who met with foul play at the game. Here, a Dutch player is caught spitting at a West German. But the Germans were far from being licked. Their defeat of Holland was followed by wins over the Czechs and then England, who advanced to the final. And in the championship game, Argentina's attack was non-existent. West Germany controlled the play, and after several near misses, the Germans were awarded a penalty kick in the 85th minute. And Andreas Brehme would make no mistake, putting it home for the winning margin. Argentina is dethroned, and the West Germans are crowned champions of the World Soccer Showcase.
Have you ever looked at the legs of a thoroughbred racehorse? The legs of a champion are rippled with muscle, but they are also thin, very thin. It seems almost impossible that those skinny legs could carry a few thousand pounds. And therein lies a problem. Sometimes the legs that move with such grace and fury aren't strong enough to carry all of that weight. In 1990, we saw what those legs could do, and we also saw what they couldn't do. In 1989, the legs of With Approval carried him to the first Canadian Triple Crown in 26 years, setting the stage for this year.
Is Bestia an absolutely brilliant performance? He crushes this field to win the Queen's Plate.
Is Bestia toying with this field in the Prince of Wales Stakes? Another dazzling display.
Lightning is going to strike twice for Kinghaven Farms. With Approval last year, is Bestia this year, and Canada salutes another Triple Crown champion.
The odds of this happening back-to-back with the same owner, trainer, jockey, and in fact almost the same breeding. The 2 horses are cousins and 2 grays. I don't know what odds Vegas would quote you on that happening, but it has to be exponential.
But the odds would catch up with Izvestia, and in fact the entire horse racing community. The track at Belmont Park would prove to be unkind to the Kinghaven colt. Izvestia finished a disappointing 6th in the Breeders' Cup Classic. But the real tragedies came earlier in the day, when 3 horses died as a result of 2 shocking spills. One of the thoroughbreds, Go For One, was expected to be named top filly in the U.S. Then, less than 3 weeks later, and just 1 day after the death of American racing legend Aladar, one of Canada's great sports heroes, Northern Dancer, was put to rest. After winning the 1964 Kentucky Derby in Preakness, along with the Queen's Plate, Dancer was retired to stud and emerged as perhaps the greatest sire in racing history. He was humanely destroyed at a Maryland stud farm after suffering a severe case of colic. He was 29. Truly a tragic end to a year that had begun so triumphantly in the sport of kings.
The kings of baseball in 1989 were the Oakland Athletics, and most of us figured that there wasn't a team around that could take their crown away in 1990. The Oakland Athletics have awesome talent and some of the biggest names in baseball. But the Athletics learned in 1988 that big names don't always do big things. And they learned that again in 1990.
Oakland fans of all ages were thrilled about the A's chances heading into the World Series. But the Cincinnati Reds had plans of their own. After all, this was a team that had led its division from wire to wire this season, getting out of the gate with 9 straight wins. They proved their worth again in the National League Championship, blowing away the Pirates in 6 games. But still, the World Series began with the talk about a possible dynasty forming in Oakland. The Reds weren't given a chance. But while Jose Rijo was shutting down the Athletics' backs, Cincinnati's Billy Hatcher was pouring on the offense, racking up a World Series record 7 consecutive hits. After a 7-0 rout in Game 1, the Reds pulled out a 5-4 extra inning thriller in Game number 2. Back in Oakland, and A's manager Tony La Russa is trying to find the right combination. But the Reds continued their assault, now with the hot hitting of Chris Sabo and a bullpen that was downright nasty. They won Game 3, 8-3, then capped off the sweep, beating Dave Stewart for the 2nd time in the series. So after years of turmoil under the Pete Rose reign, the Piniella-led Reds were finally laying claim to the championship of baseball. The A's were definitely seeing red, still finding it all hard to believe.
I believe that we're better when it comes to talent than the Cincinnati Reds. So it makes it that much more painful when you lose to a ball club with less talent.
We kept our mouths shut. We just went out there and proved it on the field. They can talk all they want, but they're gonna sit home all winter, and they know they don't got nothing because we got the ring and we got the money and we got everything. Thank you.
Throughout most of 1990, we talked about NHL expansion. At the beginning of the year, the list was long of the cities that wanted one of 2 expansion franchises the league was making available. As the year progressed, the list got smaller and smaller. One name that remained on the list was Ottawa. Always a contender, never a front-runner. The Ottawa bid had one thing going for it none of the others had. The Ottawa bid had history on its side.
The Ottawa group was headed up by the real estate development firm Terrace Investments. In August, the official Senators bid was delivered to NHL headquarters in New York City. The application was a massive volume, outlining several key elements. Among them, the storied hockey history the nation's capital enjoyed in the early 1900s. Ottawa is still home of more Stanley Cup champions over time than all but Montreal and Toronto. And the city is planning a state-of-the-art 22,000-seat arena to be built on a 98-acre site once the land is rezoned.
I think this book is the culmination of 2 years' effort, and we feel that we've covered all the bases and we have all of the proper information that's been presented, and we feel that between now and December we just have to continue to work hard and to put the best foot forward every time.
And they took a huge step in the right direction at the NHL governors' meetings in Florida. The Senators, along with Phil Esposito's group from Tampa, were the only 2 bidders to guarantee the required $50 million expansion fee on the NHL's payment schedule. And that made the league's decision an easy one.
The Board of Governors today have granted conditional franchises beginning in the 1992-93 season to the applicants representing the City of Ottawa.
It was definitely an emotional moment for Bruce Firestone, head of Terrace Investments.
It was a reaction I can't describe. I haven't burst into tears since I was a little boy, and today I had tears in my eyes.
After 56 years, the tradition has been resurrected. The Senators are reborn.
You're watching Sports 90, the year in review. When we return, we'll look at a handful of other big stories that made 1990 special. And we'll look at some of the plays that made us shake our heads in disbelief, as well as some of those plays that simply made us smile.
Welcome to Rock'em Sock'em Hockey Part 2. You know, my old coach Punch Himlock used to say, hockey is a simple game. You put the puck in and you keep it out. Well, we've got a few guys that can put it in and a few guys that can keep it out. Let's go!
Don Cherry's back with Rock'em Sock'em 2, the most incredible hockey video ever released. Exciting, hard-hitting, action-packed, all-out hockey. Don Cherry hockey. Great goals, great hits, and much, much more. All in one incredible video cassette, available only from Quality Video. Own a piece of the action and a piece of hockey history. This is the way the game should be played, and occasionally, the way it should not be played.
Folks, if you liked Rock'em Sock'em 1, you're going to love Rock'em Sock'em 2. It's hockey the way I like it, full of fun, fire, and action. It's a beauty.
The heroes, the personalities, and the legends of this amazing game, all in one great video cassette. Rock'em Sock'em 2, only from Quality Video, in stores now.
When all you rise and fall, joy and sorrow, you really gave your all. Real laughter, real tears, share the spirit of the sea.
Welcome back. We've been looking at some of the big sports events of 1990. Here now are some of the other memories that we'll all carry with us into 1991.
The year starts off in fine style as Canada wins gold at the World Junior Hockey Championship, defeating the Czechs. Joe Montana is the MVP as the 49ers win their second straight Super Bowl, a 55-10 rout of Denver. Jockey Willie Shoemaker makes his final ride at Santa Anita. He retires with an incredible 8,033 victories. The 32-day spring training lockout is over as baseball owners and players sign a new pact. Opening day is delayed by a week. Canada wins the World Men's Curling Championship in Sweden. It's Skip Ed Werenick's second world title. Canada's 1990 Athlete of the Year, Kurt Browning, wins his second straight World Men's Figure Skating title, taking the gold in Halifax. Junior sensation Eric Lindros leads the Oshawa Generals to the Memorial Cup. They beat Kitchener in double overtime of the title game. Monica Seles, who'd earlier snapped Steffi Graf's 66-match winning streak, wins the French Open, beating Graf in 2 sets. The Detroit Pistons win their second straight NBA championship, downing Portland in 5 games. Isaiah Thomas is named MVP. Baseball's all-time hits leader, Pete Rose, is sentenced to 5 months in prison for tax evasion. Another baseball figure takes a fall as George Steinbrenner is forced to resign as principal owner of the Yankees over his dealings with admitted gambler Howard Spira. The federal government gives the okay for Ben Johnson to run for Canada again when his 2-year suspension is up in September. 19-year-old Pete Sampras becomes the youngest man ever to win the U.S. Open, routing Andre Agassi in straight sets. The 1996 Summer Olympics are awarded to Atlanta, ending the hopes of Toronto and 4 other cities around the world. Edmonton goalie Grant Fuhr is suspended from the NHL for 1 year for admitted cocaine use. The Cinderella story of the year, Cecil Fielder returns from Japan to hit 51 home runs for Detroit, the first American leaguer to hit 50 since Marison Mandel back in 1961. Evander Holyfield wins the heavyweight title, destroying an out-of-shape Buster Douglas. Wayne Gretzky hits the 2,000-point mark for his career with an assist against Winnipeg. The Vanier Cup is won by the Saskatchewan Huskies at the Skydome, 24-21 over the St. Mary's Huskies. The next day, across the country in Vancouver, the professional title is decided as Winnipeg bombs Edmonton 50-11 in the Grey Cup. After 4 months of negotiations, the sale of the Montreal Expos to Canadian investors is announced, ensuring the team will stay in Montreal. The Blue Jays pull off the biggest blockbuster baseball deal in years, swapping Tony Fernandez and Fred McGriff for the Padres' Joe Carter and Roberto Alomar. And finally, the comeback of the year. Canadian downhiller Brian Stemmel finishes 10th in his first World Cup appearance since a near-fatal crash 2 years earlier.
This crash certainly reminded us how serious sport can be, but it doesn't always have to be that way. Sometimes it should simply be fun, which is where we're headed right now with our Plays of the Year. Yes, there is the reaction of the year to Roseanne Barr. Here's the reaction from this ref who says, 15 yards for hitting me in the midsection. Same sort of reaction that Derek Coleman gave, and it was a bad year for cameraman. They got bumped into, they got skewered, and they got yelled at. Now, shouldn't we have saved all of that for Roseanne Barr? This was the year that some guys lost their heads, like this player. You ever see Hamlet? Or this player checked the helmet for the head. And it was the year that Thurman Thomas tried out for The Exorcist. I like Linda Blair a little bit better. It was the year some baseball players almost lost their heads, and some did. So it was the year that the youngsters decided to cover up and wear the helmets. 1990 was the year that the beach ball returned to Major League Baseball. Listen to this usher. I mean, the guy's got to get a life, right? Hey, you almost took my beach ball away from me. You can't do that. You're out of here. It was the year of the return of the Savardi in Spinorama. Different Savard this time. It was the year when the Globetrotters returned, sometimes dressed like the New York Knicks, sometimes dressed like the Boston Celtics, and sometimes looking like Sherman Douglas. What a shot. 1990 was a year when Major League Baseball players stood up to be noticed with their juggling ability. How about Felix Jose? Or is it Jose Felix? How about Ken Griffey Jr.? Or is it Senior? How about Bo Jackson, who walked up walls this time, but you got to be a little bit worried if you live in a second-floor apartment. 1990 was the year that Charlie Brown returned to Major League Baseball. And 1990 was the year of a new sport, putting empty beer cups on the back of the heads of fat men. I think it'll catch on. 1990 was the year when Chi-Chi made a mistake. Instead of yelling 4, he yelled fetch. Our llama of the year for 1990 is this guy. He's a bouncer at a local bar. Get out of here, buddy. What are you doing in this bar? 1990 was the year when Randall Cunningham finally did the impossible. He threw the ball about 9 miles in the air. And 1990 was the year that running bases became a major league sport. Actually, it was the year that Kenny Williams finally did what Blue Jay fans have wanted to do for a while. 1990 was the year that Steve Lyons solved the dilemma of women in the locker room. He said, I'll get changed on the field. That's our show. We hope you've enjoyed it. We hope that 1990 was a good one for you and your family. And from everybody here at TSN, we hope that 1991 is even better. So long.